Hi everyone, it's Charlie and Chrissy here.
Hey.
From Forward Thinking. So today we've got a really cool episode. I'm going to be chatting to Chrissy all about email strategy and essentially looking at an email strategy that gets results and doesn't end up pissing a whole load of people off.
Yeah, one that doesn't suck, basically, if you want the TLG.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into email. It's a channel that was already very heavily trafficked, and even more so with the current situation that the world is in, where communication is only through digital means.
And more tools, right?
And there's more tools to do it. Yeah, that's a great point. I'm sure you'll get into that in a little bit. So to kick it off, let's frame what we're going to talk about, Chrissy, and why should people even care about this, and what are some things that they should care about?
Yeah, I mean, we have to be honest, email is still like a primary channel for marketing. So it's super important to make sure that you have a strategy that's going to make sure that, one, your emails get delivered and actually to your prospect or customer. But, two, that it makes sense. You're not over messaging your prospects or customers, or you're not giving them experience through email that's going to instantly lead in and unsubscribe. And I think this can be very confusing for marketing teams. They can feel a bit overwhelmed and always go the easiest route. And the easiest route is not the best route usually. And so that's why I thought, though, it's not that hard to figure out what are the steps you need to do. That actually is quite easy. And I wanted to take away the overwhelm from it. It can be very overwhelming for people in marketing ops to figure out what to do.
Just when I heard the easiest route is not the best route, I just thought of an analogy. It's like going on a hike, right? If you go on the really easy route, it might be good, but it's not going to be as rewarding.
No.
But if you go on the hard route, you get the best view, you get the most reward.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Exactly. And so I thought starting from the beginning and then go all the way down to even how you should email your prospects and customers, and when to automate and when to not. So honestly, get your notebook out, or, that's so like 90s. Get your planner out and your Lisa Frank folder. Now, get your notes ready. And I think you might be pausing on this. And I think I'm going to create a blog post on this or some type of piece of content to share with everyone. So yeah.
So where should they start? So when you're thinking about email, obviously a lot of people are probably doing a lot of email already.
Yeah.
But how can they maybe reset what they're doing, or where's a good place to start?
Yeah. So I'll maybe take off from your hiking analogy. And, if you are going on a hike, the number one thing that you do is you
walk.
Before you do that, you need to figure out your route. Where are you going?
Okay.
How do you get there? And usually, back in the day before you had your iPhone, you would look at a map. The next step would be walking, and that's what we'll go into a bit. But the first thing is, I think you should create a communication map. We're all about documentation here at Forward Thinking. We've talked about it a lot. But I think this is a good place to go into whatever tool you have, like Whimsical, Lucid, and map out all the places and tools that send out email to your prospects and customers. And honestly, you might have to do some interviewing here. You might find that a customer success team or product team is using a tool like SendGrid or something, and you have no idea.
Yeah. So what are some common, if you had to say across our clients or companies we speak to, what are the usual suspects that people know where to direct their energy to figure that out?
Yeah, so the first one is obviously your marketing automation platform or email platform. I weirdly had a conversation or email thread with someone who they used MailChimp, but also used HubSpot. So
I feel like I've stumbled across that a lot.
Yeah, I think
they're spending all this money on Marketo, and then they're like, oh,
we're going to send mass
X
email.
team is like, oh, I don't want to damage our deliverability with
right.
Marketo or something, or maybe Marketo isn't delivering, so they'll go get MailChimp and just blast emails out of it. It makes me want to cry, but
yeah, pain. We'll talk about that. But yeah, so look there. Any tools from the marketing team. There might even be tools that you don't even realize. So like any customer kind of influence tools or partner marketing tools. Those might be sending out email too. So make sure to think exhaustively here.
And sales engagement tools.
Yeah. So the next one is sales. So sales engagement tools like Outreach or SalesLoft, they're a big part of what we're going to talk about today because they're like the next big player for these of, how much email is being sent out and how easily they can be misused. And then the third is like from your product or from like a customer success team. So Gainsight, tools like that, they have mass emailing to them, potentially like a Zendesk.
And what would you find? And what would you find out? Would just the tool, or would you also dig into how they're using it?
I would, both. So I would go into who you're sending email to from them. How is email being sent out? Are there any like ways that you're capturing email opt out? So I'll talk about that, but definitely figure out like, how the settings for sending emails in mass, collecting opt-in information or opt-out information, and how you're getting back that, and who you're targeting and how often it's being used. So all of that. And to take the next step also is, how do those tools send out their email? Do you have a dedicated IP with it? Are you on a shared IP? This all kind of, what domain are you sending email from? Is it your actual, company domain, or is it a subdomain? So those are additional questions to
basically audit everything, figure it all out, write it all down, and get that bird's eye view.
Yeah.
I think that's good advice for anything, but especially this, where there's, a lot of people probably don't know all these answers off the top of their head, right?
Yeah. And
especially on how people are using things. The amount of times I'll ask marketing ops, what are the sales team doing in Outreach or SalesLoft? And they have no idea, which, it's not their fault, but it's probably time to figure that out because that's part of the whole email strategy.
Yeah. And I think you can talk to IT, but really talking to the end users of those tools for how they're using it and how many emails they're using is important too. I think some people just think, I'll just talk to IT and ask them. They probably know. And they're not really good. They might not know, and then they probably don't know how they're being used. So
one interesting thing, I think we work with a lot of startups and mid-market companies, which the owner of the tool is generally the team that's also the end user, right? Like the marketing team owns the marketing automation platform, the sales team owns the sales engagement platform, the customer success team owns their platform. Whereas a lot of the enterprise companies that we speak to, the IT team owns a lot of that, right? So I think it depends on kind of where you go might depend on the size of your company, the ownership of these tools and things like that. Would you agree with that?
That's a great point. Yeah, I totally agree with that. But I think it's also warrants figuring out someone like within that respective team that maybe even works with IT, because they are going to have insight into how you're using it and how you'll continue to use it. So, and
actually, speaking of IT, this next part I think is where you definitely want to buddy up with IT, right? So, what so once you've got the map, it looks like from what you're talking about, like protocols is the next step.
Yeah. And I don't think that people here need to be an expert on this, but just starting the conversation to make sure you have your email protocols in place. Market automation platforms and stuff, they'll at a minimum make you put in SPF and DKIM. So a lot of you listeners who are on the marketing ops side kind of know what that is. And that helps out with your deliverability and giving that system basically the permission to send out your email or email on behalf of your domain. But there are other things that you can do to really ensure that your email gets delivered. And Charlie and I were having a brief discussion right before this on the difference between deliverability, because that your tools might say, oh, all of these emails got delivered. But really deliverability versus the delivery, the actual delivery. Did it make its way into the person's
Yeah. So
inbox?
do you want to double tap on that? So just so it's really clear the difference between an email being delivered versus deliverability.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people use the word interchangeably, but actually there is a difference. And even on documentation for tools, it'll talk about the deliverability, but really the numbers that we're getting from these tools is really just the delivery rate. So basically, was this spam, did it get delivered somewhere or was it rejected? And there's a difference between deliverability because that's whether your message actually made it to your prospect or customers. And there are different things in place that could prevent your prospect from receiving it.
Yeah, like a filter or a firewall.
Yeah.
Or it just ends up in the spam folder, etc.
Yeah. And so all of those, are deliverability issues. If you find that you're getting to a spam folder, that's a deliverability issue. But you could still see that email got delivered. It just happened to make it into their spam.
Right, which is super confusing because every time everyone looks at their delivery rate in Marketo or whatever tool and it's 99%, you're thinking it's getting into the inbox 99% of the time. But actually, I think I read some statistics yesterday, and it could be as little as 50% of the time, especially if you're targeting enterprise, where they're going to have incredibly secure systems in place, or they'll try to have incredibly secure systems in place to filter and block emails using tools like Barracuda or other email security vendors.
Yeah, and there are things that can really help with your deliverability that you can put in place, and that means maybe adding on extra protocols like DMARC, or ensuring you have a dedicated IP. Having a shared IP can really impact your deliverability of your email. There's also some things, if you do have a dedicated IP, you can add on things like a branded return path. And so we won't go into too much depth, but we are thinking maybe having a deliverability expert on who can talk through all of this in
depth.
If you
know one, let us know.
Yeah,
if you are one, let us know. It goes deep.
Yeah. So definitely make sure that's in place. I've even seen cases where SPF and DKIM wasn't even validating. They're still sending out email.
So then moving on to the next thing, and I think to frame this, it's important for people to understand that deliverability, right, is based on some of the stuff you just talked about, but also on engagement, right? Yeah. A lot of these email providers like Gmail, like Microsoft, they're able to see how many, in simplest terms, how many emails have come from your company. So your company's called Company X. How many emails has any of their clients received from Company X? How many were opened? How many were marked as spam? How many did you click? Did you junk? Did you delete? And that's factored all into the algorithm to determine whether it should end up in the spam folder, whether this email should be quarantined, etc. So one of the biggest facets, and what we try and talk to clients about all the time, is when you send email and when you are emailing your database, if you're not following some of the best practices that I'm going to ask you about, it's going to overall impact your deliverability going forward, right? It's not like you don't get away with it, right? So I think the engagement piece people forget about, and they think, oh, I can batch and blast and do all this, and it's not going to impact me over time. But you might continually see less and less people opening and clicking your emails because less and less of those emails are actually getting to this person. Even though those emails are not bouncing, right? Yeah. They're still saying it's delivered. It's still not getting to those people because the email provider is blocking those emails or moving them to spam. So the engagement piece. So how can you, I think one of the big things you want to talk about is the rules of engagement, right? Yeah. Because so you don't have a lot of teams going crazy. So how do you think about enforcing rules so you can create a better experience for your recipients across all these disparate systems and teams?
Yeah. And I'll start out with like, in some ways, I kind of feel like this has gotten worse. Like, I'm not going to blame it on ABM, but ABM does play a big role into this because
that's very true.
we used to do kind of more of an inbound marketing approach and just, we might be emailing 1 to 2 people from that account. But really now it's, we have tons of people from the account in your system, and a lot of lazy ABM has been maybe not using some best practices. And then you're also potentially targeting enterprises who don't, take their email, how they handle their email very seriously. So I'm not going to say ABM is the culprit for a lot of the.
You can say it.
It kind of is. Yeah. It kind of is. And people's definition of ABM. So, but I think the first thing, and companies like Demandbase and Gageo, before they became Demandbase, like would talk about creating a email strategy or even communication strategy. And this is something I totally suggest for campaigns, but you can just simply tie this approach into email. So, the 3 teams that are mostly we're talking about are sales, marketing, customer success, like the revenue team, right? And they're all emailing prospects and customers. And it could be that you're over emailing people. And that plays a big role. And I'll talk into best practices too, when, maybe emailing when you shouldn't, but even over emailing is a big thing. Cause that will lead to unsubscribes. And once someone unsubscribes, that's it, right? You can't really email them again unless they engage with you again and go through a whole opt-in process. And that doesn't really happen very often. So.
And if the client is seeing, like the company that you're emailing is seeing that you're emailing them thousands of messages every month and no one at that company is opening them, then that's a quick one-way ticket to the spam folder.
Totally. And I've talked about this before. Not having one of these in place will also lead to really weird things like sales telling marketing not to email anyone or not even to email the whole account. And really it should be a joint effort. Like the marketing and sales should be working in tandem with each other. So it's better just to create like swim lanes for things. So creating swim lanes for, and also put in email limits maybe within a tool as well, because this will help too with just the too many emails going out from that tool at one time, ensuring that you're not over communicating. So
what's a good example of swim lanes? Can you map that up?
Yeah, so the first one I would say for the first sales, kind of talking through who they can email, but I think the first thing is knowing like for like cold prospects, that should just be sales. So marketing shouldn't be emailing them. Obviously customer success won't be emailing them, but really just sales should be emailing them. And I'll talk about that in the next piece on, do we automate email? But first, cold emails, cold prospects, that should just be sales.
100% of the time?
I mean, I have to draw a line in the sand and say yes.
Make a stand.
This is a hot take, but I'll say yes. It doesn't mean that, yes, on my side.
So 100% of the time.
Cold prospects, like literally you pull that person from ZoomInfo. They know nothing about your company whatsoever. Yes.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And so
I'll talk about some maybe differences beyond those people in a second of like maybe where you can maybe not cut a cord, but have a way where marketing, or you can automate some of that. That's the key thing. Like just because I said sales is the only people that can email, it doesn't mean that all of that needs to just be one-to-one email. I'll talk about the difference between one-to-one email, where you can automate pieces of that, because obviously like people need to hit their numbers. I hate all this thing like, sales prospecting is so terrible. Don't reach out to me unless I've said I want to, hear from your company. That's bullshit. Like, how are you going to make your revenue numbers, right? And so we need to be sympathetic to a salesperson in their job, and outbound does have a place, but just doing it right. Totally. So yeah. And then,
and to add on to that, if sales is managing just cold, right? Mm-hmm. Then the people who are receiving those emails are going to be getting a much more consistent experience. They're not going to be over emailed. Therefore, maybe deliverability could improve, because marketing might be sending too many emails to that company or person pulling down deliverability, right? So
Mhm.
you could end up seeing the response rates going up by actually emailing less.
Totally. And for a cold prospect, seeing someone send them like a one-to-one email from a salesperson is less likely to get marked as spam than if you're just receiving a marketing email.
Exactly. And how I ask anyone listening, when was the last time you received a marketing email, an obvious marketing email from a company you never heard of or lightly heard of that you didn't subscribe to and like it? Probably zero, right?
Yeah.
But how many times? I know obviously there's what you just talked about. People complain about salespeople. There's a lot of salespeople out there that might not be having the best approach, but there are some really good ones out there. If you received a very well crafted message from a salesperson, right, very
Mhm.
specific to you, your company, your use cases you're trying to tackle,
Yeah.
then are you going to be more receptive to that?
Yeah. If anything, I love it.
Yeah.
Especially when it's done well. I'm like, I'll praise those people. I received like a video or something, I think a personalized video one time from someone and I was like, oh, I'm gonna share this. So yeah, if anything, I'm a marketer and I appreciate it.
Yeah. So that we always like to talk about market to people like you would want to be marketed to. Right?
Exactly.
So that's first swim lane. What's another one?
Yeah. So, I mean, from a marketing standpoint, for anything that's kind of, from a nurture standpoint for inbound leads, people that have engaged with marketing can email those people. Even if maybe someone originally came in sales outbound, but ended up engaging with marketing can email those people. And then also customers. But this is where marketing should be in lockstep with customer success versus marketing. What are the types of emails customer success is sending versus a customer marketing team? And you might find that there's like overlap and sending out like conflicting messages. So does marketing own sending out, customer webinars, trainings, and stuff like that? And customer success really just does personal reach out, or is the customer success team on the hook for doing some of the other education and stuff? So getting clear on like what types of emails are being sent across those groups for customer is probably the one you'll need to clearly define.
Mm-hmm. So are they the major swim lanes then, or are there any more?
There's also like stuff for product updates, which may come from the product team, and that could go down through the customer side as well. So, but those are kind of your major swim lanes. And if anything for product updates, I love that coming out of the app itself and not sending it through email, because if you do have any deliverability rates, you might have some angry customers or customers who don't know what came out in your product or what are some
so like a
product
notification
updates
within the application itself.
Yeah, and you can do that just like even on your login page or
Yeah.
announcement when you first log in, or if you use like a Pendo or something like that, you can even customize that experience even within different parts of your app.
Totally. Yeah. How many times have people had complaints from customers that you didn't receive that important update email, right?
Yeah.
And that's the risk you're playing with all of this if it's going out of your marketing automation platform like that.
And it's a better experience, and you can use chat for that kind of stuff as well, and make it a bit more of an interactive experience if they do have questions on those new features.
So one more question on the swim lanes. Where do they intersect and when do they end? So would you have any rules where maybe the swim lane for cold can jump into the marketing swim lane and then if you're in either swim lane, do you have any rules of thumb to say how long you should be trying to communicate with people that may not be responding?
So for cold and for sales outbound, I think that should purely stay in sales. And then that's where I feel like in some ways marketing feels like they need to take some of that to send out to do more of like the automation. But if you're using a sales engagement tool, I think really you can do a mixture of one-to-one and then automation, which I'll talk about like when we automate. But really that should stay there. The intersection, I think, will always be kind of your engaged prospects and customers, where that will have different touch points across sales, marketing, and customer success. But I do think that marketing takes more of the educational approach. Sales is more of obviously the selling approach, and doing more of that like crafted, research and outreach. And I do think it's important to do that. You might have an MQL that's maybe being reached out to by sales, but that person's actually engaged with your content. Send them more content. Take the cold people are the ones that don't want to receive that. Like, for the people that do, and that's the crazy thing. I see people like, oh, MQLs goes to sales, never emailing them for marketing again until they get nurtured. But we know that also people don't get nurtured in a timely manner. There's stuff sitting there and working that hasn't been reached out to. So really, like, marketing should take a nurture approach. You can just maybe limit how many emails get sent, but really think about like the education there.
And what about when a cold person does engage?
Yeah, I think that can, exactly. So engaged people, that's when marketing can kind of take over again and start nurturing those people too.
Okay.
So the whole point really is with your brand, with the sales outreach, is if they can get them to engage, right? That's the best case scenario, because then now marketing is able to nurture those people.
And then in terms of timeline, do you have any swim lanes for people who previously engaged but haven't engaged for a very long time?
I think it's important to make note of that, because I think if you're still sending email to people who are inactive, you're going to hurt your email just performance in general. So I think when someone does, if someone got nurtured by sales, sometimes having a cool off period is nice as well, because they've just been touched by sales loads of times and they may have said, oh, I'm not ready. Maybe do like a mini cool off period, depending on what the nurture reason was, especially. And then you can nurture them differently based on those nurture responses too. But, I don't know, 15, 30 days, just give them a little bit of a breather. If you think, like, say it's like a closed loss opportunity is kind of one of those ones I think of. And then you may have a different nurture approach. But if someone just goes completely inactive and it's been like 90 days, or you can maybe even go a little bit further, I would say, like, don't email them for marketing. Wait till they come back to you. You might have like certain campaigns where you try and re-engage. But I think we talked about this with a guest before as well, but they don't really perform that well either. So those are also great outbound. Like, you can almost treat those as cold prospects again from outbound if they work at a company, and then they'll go down that path.
Yep. And then always be making sure that you're clearing out your database and you've got data best practices going on. So you're not just retaining all of this old data where people left the company and then risking issues when you start to email, if you do start to email them again, right?
Yeah.
A nice way to ruin your deliverability is by emailing inactive people or spam traps.
Yeah, I think that the more is more mentality does not make sense here. Mm-hmm. I had like a few weeks ago, someone just left a flyer for a nail salon on my door, and I'm just like, I just hate when people do that, right? Just literally put on every single person's door. Not only do I hate that from what a waste of paper, but I didn't ask for that. And also, you just look at like how many they just put out there. That's a case of like, more is not more. How many responses are going to get from that? And if anything, it looks a bit desperate,
Yeah, I think that case, so I remember that. They just like threw it on the floor, like not even by the door, right?
Yeah, it was just like on our bush or something.
Yeah, it was on our bush. Yeah, it was just littering, basically.
Yeah, and so think about that. Like, that should not be your email approach. Like, there's nothing personalized to me of why I even want to go there. What if I was just like, someone who doesn't get their nails done? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So take the approach, like, don't take that approach when it comes to your email. And also, how much harder is that, right?
I mean, it got your attention though. Actually, you're talking about it now. Do you want to shout out the company?
I don't even remember the name. So, but yeah.
Well, I actually, so yesterday, we've been conducting a deliverability audit for one of our clients, and we, interestingly, over time, I was looking at their sent volume versus their engagement metrics.
Mm-hmm.
Because engagement metrics are a good kind of proxy or number to look at. I know they can be, ruined by spam clicks and things like that, but a good way to kind of see your deliverability trends, because it's very hard to say whether it really got into the inbox or not.
Yeah.
But if you're seeing everything going up, like your click and your open rate, it's likely that something that you're doing should be improving deliverability, or you're obviously the fact that people are engaging can also then ultimately improve your deliverability. But anyway, the actual sent volume went down to 25. Well, it didn't go down 20, went down 75%. Like they were emailing, I think it was around like 200,000 a month or something, and then it went down to under, like it was like 50,000 ish. I think even some months a little bit less than that. But as they started doing that, the conversion rates for open and clicks started going up. Of course, there's just like a math situation there where you email less people, that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But it's a good, like the volume of people engaging stayed the same and went up. So that the point of less is more, or more isn't
more
always better,
more.
Right? Is so true, right? And it just beautifully displayed that in the metrics that we were looking at.
Yeah.
So then once you've got your swim lanes, I mean, you've been touching on automating, right? So once you've defined these swim lanes, what is your thoughts on automation around email? Because there's a lot you can do, but there's probably a lot you shouldn't do.
There's a lot you can do, and that's the tricky part. I think with sales engagement tools, having, sequences and being able to do mass emailing, that just, leads to that more is more thing. And I think when you're desperate and on either side, marketing side, sales side, you're going to go down these like wrong paths to get engagement. And so, but I think it doesn't need to be overwhelming, and it also doesn't need to make you feel like you can't make your numbers. It just means having a little bit of like a strategy around that. And we're kind of living on time, but I want to make sure we really touch on this. So when do I automate email? I think that's a big thing. And even now I'm starting to like get my thoughts around it too. And I've always talked about it with clients, but I think having one that's a compromise, I think is a good way to think about this. So when you're sending to cold emails, this should be from sales, right? And it should be one-to-one. So if there's like just plain cold, just reaching out, you don't know if there's any likelihood of them buying, or there hasn't been an event to show that they might buy or intent or anything like that, a one-to-one email is the best thing you can do. And personalizing it is the best thing you can do. Like personalizing it, and you can pull from different buckets, but a lot of the time it'll be like based on research. If you can't find certain research, look into stuff that prospect's done online, or find them on social, like their stuff, and then reference some of the content they put out there, making that email as relevant as possible to the person. It could even be, you went to my college, that's so cool, like when did you study there? Having something to reach out to about is better than nothing.
And I'd have an example of, and you don't have to over-engineer it and go too crazy, right? No. So an example that I had the other day, someone messaged me on LinkedIn and said, do you want to start? Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? And I have in my LinkedIn like headline or whatever, podcast host.
Yeah.
So all it would have taken for a better message there to be like, oh, I saw you're the podcast host. Mm-hmm. Maybe listen to just one episode and say, I listened to this one episode. And I would have been so much more interested in what that person had to say.
Right. Did you like unconnect with?
I actually messaged, he actually got a response because I messaged him back and I said, look, I don't like hating on salespeople, but you really should have just looked.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
So actually, no, this is a good point because I want to make sure we stay on time.
Okay.
But because the last part I talked about is reporting and responses, because not all response is created equal. And I think that's important to know with the future of like how we track email engagement. So, but yes, I think exactly.
Sorry, I took us on a tangent
there. No. That's a good example. Do not do that. And that's it. So that's a one-to-one. No automation. What you can automate is just literally like send that person to outreach for a task for yourself or something like that, but you're creating the email.
So you would never automate for cold?
No.
In a perfect world?
No. The But, well, okay, not never. I do have a subset of cold prospects that you can automate campaigns for, but it's going to be a mixture of some automation and some one-to-one. So, one to many and one-to-one. So, but this falls into a category that they have a likelihood to buy, or they have an event or like premise that makes it so that they may be a good
And
quality.
where would you figure that out?
So there are different sources. Part of that could be like G2, intent data, or just intent data in general. This could be like a referral from like a customer. Someone said, oh, hey, this person might be interested. They don't know about you really, but like maybe someone said that you might be interested.
See them talking about stuff on social related.
Yeah, you see them talking about something on social. You maybe have like a common VC with the company. Your CEO may have a connection with them. All of those, or they may have just gotten funding or did a new hire. So if you have some tool around security and they just hired a CISO, or you do something on security and they just had a breach that was public, that could be something where you could potentially like reach out cold, but put in some automation. But I would say like some automation means like maybe some of those touch points are through an automated sequence for a few of those steps or the calls, but then you may have like one or two emails within that flow where you actually need to personalize some of the messaging.
Yeah, makes sense.
But it could be at scale too. So some of the personalized parts of that messaging could actually just be fields that you maybe populate in Salesforce, and then the templates use that. And then for inbound leads like demo and contact us, that should just be automated. So automatically send out response to that makes sure that it's timely. And then for engaged inbound leads, of course you can send automated nurture for marketing, and try to make that as personalized as you can by persona, industry, what type of product. But also for those people, if they are, if they end up becoming MQL and they're ready for sales because they did something, you can put some automation in there, but some personalization maybe based on like what they did and how they got to you, and even incorporate as much that you research points that maybe you plug into details in Salesforce as well. So that can be a bit more automated too.
So then I know we're running out of time here, but did you want to touch on reporting quickly before we wrap this up?
So the last thing is just make sure you do your reporting. Keep a close eye on not just delivery or like but the deliverability if you can. So try and look into any like balance information that you have, or even talk to your customer success team. Are your customers even receiving the emails that you're sending from marketing?
That's a great way to just try and figure out if you've got problems, right? Just ask people that are friendlies. Yeah.
And then for sales, I think a response is not created equal. And that's why I think it's good to also look at like the goals and like what comes out of that. So how well is the sequence to getting a meeting booked? How many opportunities, like how well are your sequences doing? And for a client, we even create campaigns just for sequences, because we want to be able to see like pipeline tied to those too. You don't need to go to that extent, but doing some type of reporting there to really see outcomes. And Outreach actually just did an announcement on a beta feature where they're going to do more around sentiment and getting insights into positive responses versus negative responses. And I think that is hopefully the future of using AI for good, because it's really hard to track when you're just looking at like a generic response, which could be even an out of office, right? Or some type of message like, no, stop emailing me. Some tools will pick that up as a response. We don't want that. So definitely do your reporting. And I think to end this, developing an email strategy can be like confusing. You got to get a lot of people on board, but really, I think this is an important one to invest time in. And if it's not on your roadmap for next year, maybe make that a goal, and start planning across the teams, develop a strategy that scales, but you'll ensure your prospects and customers are happy and educated, and you'll actually get good deliverability and response rates, and positive responses at that. So hopefully this was helpful for everyone and kind of gave a clear path into what you can do and what really provides an impact.
Yeah, that's great. And I always think of email as the number one channel where you have to be patient, especially if maybe you start at a new company and things haven't really been as great as kind of what you've just described, and you do have deliverability issues. You're not going to fix that overnight, but you have to have a plan like this, and then be really disciplined, and in a few months you'll start seeing results. So I thought that was great. Follow that plan, and I think we're doing maybe a round 2 with a deliverability expert on this, and I'm sure we could dive into all of these subcategories or subtopics in this topic in far more detail. So thanks.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode of Forward Thinking.
Bye. This is Charlie. So if you liked what you heard, hit like on the platform where you watched this. Also, leave a review. Honestly, we would really, really appreciate it. You can also subscribe where you listen to your podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or even YouTube. And make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, which is packed full of exclusive content, updates for events or courses that we might be doing, all designed to elevate your marketing operations and B2B strategy. See you next time on Forward, and Forward it up.